Okay, and welcome to this demo of EasyDodge. EasyDodge is a custom Photoshop panel that will allow you to selectively darken or lighten certain parts of your image in order to make it more appealing and to better convey what you want it to say. It's very much like dodging and burning in the traditional darkroom, only easier, hence the name. The panel exists in two forms, the full panel discussed in this video and a light version of the panel which I'll talk about in another video. The panels are actually a bonus that comes with the ebook on dodging and burning I wrote for Craft and Vision. Well, back to the panel. After installation, which is explained in the PDF that accompanies the ebook, you will find EasyDodge under the Window Extensions menu. The panel exists, by the way, in two flavors. There is one for CS6 users and there is one for CS5 users. EasyDodge is actually a custom panel made in Adobe Configurator for those of you who are interested, with buttons, like the ones over here, that will trigger corresponding Photoshop actions. And of course these actions are also included in the download. Now by far the most interesting part of EasyDodge is this one here, Easy Dodge and Burn with Selections. Now you may have used different methods of dodging and burning before, and I covered them at great length in the ebook. For example, one of those is to use dodging and burning with a single layer and by really painting with black and white paint onto a neutral gray layer. And as I said, I discussed it in the ebook, but generally I will use that only for very detailed dodging and burning towards the end of a dodging and burning workflow. The power of EasyDodge lies in the fact that it lets you move quicker, dodging and burning larger parts of your image by making really rough selections and then feathering those with a certain feather amount. Now take, for example, this man's face. Suppose I want to brighten up his face, I want to lighten it. I will just make a very loose selection using the lasso tool, and I probably could even do this with a regular mouse, although I'm using my trusted Wacom over here. So I will make this loose selection, it doesn't really have to be pixel perfect, and then I will hit one of the corresponding lighten buttons. And these buttons all do the same, they all lighten the selection by a certain amount, but their difference lies in the feathering that they will apply to the selection. So in this case I will choose the lighten 250 pixels button. And what this will do, as you see, it will lighten the selection, put a 250 pixel feather on the selection as to hide the transition between the brightened and the unbrightened parts of the image, and it will put this on a separate adjustment layer. So everything this panel does is completely adjustable and non-destructive. As a general rule of thumb, the larger your selection is, the larger you'll want your feather value to be, so that the edited and the unedited parts of the image blend in with each other more easily. So as I said, in this case I just hit the lighten to 50 pixels button. Now I find this to be too bright, so what I will do is, since everything is on its own layer, I will tweak the layer opacity, and what I have done is I have included a quick access button over here in the volume control and finishing part of the panel that will allow you to quickly do so. So in this case I will just hit the fade 50% button, and this will put the opacity of the adjustment layer to 50%. Again, this is something you can of course do in Photoshop by dragging the slider or by using the shortcuts available, but putting this little preset over here allows you to just focus on the panel and on the image at hand. So that's already starting to look better. Now I also want to lighten his eyes. So I will make a quick selection of the camera left eye over here, hold down my Shift key, and this is where the Wacom is already starting to come in a little bit handier than a mouse. So hold down the Shift key and select the camera right eye. So holding down the Shift key combines both selections with each other. And now I won't use the 250 pixel button because that would be way too much of a feathering compared to the size of my selection, but I will probably use the lighten 75 pixels button. So I hit this button over here, and what this does is it effectively lightens just the eye part. Again, you could brush this in with a brush, but it's a lot faster and easier to just make two very rough selections and hit the lighten 75 pixel button on the panel. Since everything is on separate layers, if I want to see how the effect is built up, I can toggle the little layer visibility eyeballs over here. So for example, this is before dodging the eyes, this is after, and you see the image improves dramatically. Now suppose I want this effect to be even stronger. I can of course duplicate the layer, but I have a duplicate effect button right here on my panel, so I don't have to worry about which shortcut or anything. I just hit the duplicate effect button over here. Now That might be a little bit too much to my taste, so what I will do is I will hit the fade 50% button, so after having duplicated the effect, which will effectively give me 1.5 times the original amount of brightening that I did. Now another thing that is bothering me with the overall lightening is that the nose is becoming too bright. So again, I will quickly select the nose area over here, and I will hit one of the darken buttons, and in this case I will use the darken 25 pixel button over here. After a while you'll quickly get the hang of which feathering value you should choose. I also have the ear over here that's a little bit too bright and therefore distracting, so I will quickly select it, use the darken 75 pixel over here, and there I have darkened it a little bit more. As I mentioned in the Dodge and Burn ebook, your eye always gets drawn to the brightest parts of an image, and therefore what I'm doing now is kind of redistributing the way your eye moves through the image. Again, by Alt or Option clicking on the lower visibility eyeball, I can turn off my entire set of steps and turn them back on. And the result is subtle, which it should be, but yet it is important. Now I also want to darken the jacket in order to guide your eyes even more towards his face. So what I will do is again make a rough selection of the jacket, like this. Hit the darken to 250 pixels button. There I have darkened the jacket. Now the tonality of the jacket and the pullover start to be a little bit too much of the same thing, so I will quickly select the pullover, hit the lighten 75 pixels button, and there I have re-established some kind of tonal contrast between the pullover on the one hand and the jacket on the other hand, and I have in the meantime even more directed your eye towards the face of the man. Now suppose I want to add a vignette. So what I can do over here is just draw a very loose and maybe a little bit erratic selection over here, and then hit the invert selection button, which will, as the name implies, invert the selection, and then hit the darken 250 pixels button. And now I have effectively added a hand-drawn vignette, but it didn't take me the time to completely paint it. I just made it based out of a selection. Now that's about it for the darkening and lightening parts. I also have the same options for adding and reducing contrast with selection, which is something the light version of the panel doesn't have. Say for argument's sake that I want to decrease the contrast on the face a little bit. So again, I just select the face roughly and I hit the minus contrast 250 pixel button over here, and this will reduce the overall contrast on the face. Now, what if you do something and you don't like the effect, such as over here, I actually don't like the reduced contrast that much? Well, you just hit the delete active layer button, which will, as you might have guessed, delete the last added effect. Now, that's about it for the global enhancements. What I will do now is quickly use Dodge and Burn single layer found over here to work with very high detail on the eyes. So I hit the button, and what it does, it sets up a layer filled with 50% gray in the soft light blending mode. Now all I have to do is zoom into my image and paint with black or white paint, and the action has already reset the default value, so black on white. And if I want to brighten certain parts of an image, so the only thing I have to do is choose a brush size. So there's this new cute little option on CS5 and CS6 that by Control Alt or Option dragging on a Mac and dragging your cursor to the left or the right, you can interactively change the size of the brush. By dragging up and down, you change the hardness or the feather value of the brush. So in this case, I want the brush to be a little bit like this. And then by toggling the foreground and background colors, because I actually want to brighten part of his eyes over here, so I will hit the X key and I will put the opacity to somewhere at about 40 or 50%, and this will allow me to gently paint in a little bit of a lightening effect in the eyes here to make them stand out a little bit more. Now hitting the X key again will toggle black to be my foreground color, and then if I want I can darken the pupils a little bit more. So it's subtle, but this is before and this is after, and a little bit of this really can make a difference in your image. Just again, don't overdo it, of course. There's also a dodge and burn option, putting the dodging and the burning effect on separate layers, but I won't discuss this over here in this video. There is still one thing left to show you, and it's an important thing, and it's also not included in the light version of the panel, and these are the Add Clarity buttons over here, which will increase local contrast. very much like the clarity slider in Lightroom or Adobe Camera Raw does. Now, there is no such thing as a single clarity slider in Photoshop as you have in Lightroom, but there's the option to simulate it with these buttons. So hitting the Add Clarity Medium button over here, and I recommend that you use the medium as a starting point, will allow you to paint with local sharpness on some parts of your image. So I will just hit the button and let it walk me through the steps. This is kind of a processor intensive effect, so it can take some time. But what happens is, well, actually, at first glance, nothing happens. And that's because the extra layer that the effect has created has been hidden by a black layer mask over here. So let me shift click on that layer mask to toggle it off temporarily, and then you see what the button has done. Now, here it's applied on the whole image, and of course that's way too much. The idea of this is to selectively or creatively sharpen parts of your image, increasing texture where you want it. This is not something you want to apply globally, or at least not in this amount on your image, but as I said, locally. And that's where the layer mask comes in handy. So if you're new to layer masks, here's a quick layer masking 101. Everywhere where the layer mask is black, it will block the layer it corresponds with. In this case, this layer, which has the clarity effect. So everywhere where this is black, you will actually see the underlying layers through. Wherever the layer mask is white, and you can make it white by painting with a white brush on it, just make sure that you're painting in the layer mask itself as indicated by these rectangular corners over here. So don't paint in the layer, but in the layer mask, and the layer mask is targeted by default by the actions. So painting in the layer mask with white will reveal the corresponding parts of the sharpening effect in this case. So in layer masks, the saying goes, black conceals and white reveals. Black paint in the layer mask conceals the current layer, whereas white in that layer mask reveals it. Now back to the Add Clarity buttons. The action set has set up this layer with added clarity, and remember, it's hidden from view because the layer mask is black. So remember, this is an effect you want to apply locally, and also remember that too much sharpening kills the sharpening. So what I will do is I will zoom in a little bit, and then I will paint with about 50% opacity again, and I will paint on certain areas of the image, increasing my brush slightly, such as the eyes over here, maybe the eyebrows a little bit over here. And I will paint at 100% just to make sure this survives the compression of the video. So again, I would probably use a little bit more caution when I would do this for real, but as this probably gets blurred anyway by the compression of the video, I will overdo it a little bit. And typical areas you want to include this on are the hair, the eyes. Like in this case, the man's stubble is an ideal surface to add some creative sharpening over here. And again, because everything is on its own layer, toggling the opacity or the visibility of the layer on and off will show you a before and after. Again, I overdid a little bit. I might use the fade 50% button to put the opacity on 50%, and there you have it. Now, stacking all these layers on top of each other is really handy because everything remains fully editable. However, the downside is that the file size increases big time. So when you're done editing and you're sure you don't need to revisit this image, you could press either the flatten buttons over here, the flatten button, which will flatten the image, or even press the flatten and 8-bit button, which will, if your image is, like in this case, a 16-bit per image file, which will, as you see, I'm at 174 megabytes right now because of all the extra layers I added. If I hit the flatten 8-bit button, this will go down to a 34 megabyte file. So that's a quick walkthrough of the Easy Dodge Full panel. I hope you enjoyed this demo, and I hope you will enjoy reading the ebook Dodge and Burn, Leading the Eye in Lightroom and Photoshop as much as I enjoyed writing it.